that time once again, ladies and gentlemen. The election is right around the corner. In just a couple of weeks, Americans will head to the polls. Early voting is also currently underway to choose their candidate. Is it going to be Trump? Is it going to be Harris? And you have a lot of musicians also currently speaking out, as per usual, about their chosen candidate. And as is their right, there's a lot of strong opinions about whether or not artists should be speaking about politics or whether they should not be speaking about politics. But the main point is, it's their platform. They can say whatever they want, and the fans can ultimately decide what they want to do. What's also interesting is this election so far has been the most podcast-centric election in our history. And so politics are finally catching up to where things actually are. In the past, it's pretty much heavily slanted to the network television appearances, and then also the blogs, the political websites, whatever you want to have. And now you're seeing Trump and Harris both going around doing the podcast interviews at a level we haven't seen. And there's a lot of speculation that we may also see potentially Trump and Harris appearing separately on the Joe Rogan Experience, which would be super interesting to see. How do they shape up in long form podcast experiences? But here in music and in rock in particular, you have people that have various viewpoints, people who want Harris to win, people who want Trump to win. And what's interesting though is how people react to those who have different viewpoints. I think that's what the real interesting measure is of someone. How do they get along with people who don't believe the same as them? And this is something that we've heard John Cooper from Skillet speak a lot about. This is a guy who has his own beliefs. He's very vocal about that as well. But also he has, throughout his entire career and continues to do so, constantly touring with his band with various different artists with diverse belief sets that certainly not all of them agree with John Cooper on anything, but he still gets along with them. The band still gets along, and you don't really hear people saying, oh, we didn't have a good tour with Skillet. We didn't have a good time. We're arguing. And in fact, I've had John Cooper on the podcast. He's told me, hey, I've never even gotten into a political, ugly argument with somebody who's in a band that I'm touring on. You know, it's like we just get along. We figure out what we have in common and we move forward. And I really think, you know, as Americans, at the end of the day, if you pay your taxes, go to the polls, you vote for who you want, you don't really need to be spending a lot of time going around screaming at each other over who you're going to vote for. But interestingly enough, John Cooper is speaking about something recently that happened on Twitter, now known as X, and it involves none other than former Skid Row vocalist Sebastian Bach. And, you know, he has his own right as well to speak his mind, and he's out there on social media sharing his beliefs. Again, there's really nothing wrong with that. If you don't like it, you don't have to tune into what he's saying. But it's what he said in one message in particular, which has now been deleted, that Cooper is responding to. And so one fan was saying, you know, basically, he talks about politics a lot on social media, so he's asking, hey, you know, Sebastian, are you going to be going off about politics a lot at your show? Are you going to be talking about politics on stage? Because, you know, I don't really want to hear that. He says something to that effect. And to which Sebastian responds, hey, Sebastian, he says something to the effect of, you know, Sebastian Bach talks about whatever he wants at the shows. If you don't like it, you can stay home. And so a lot of people reacted negatively to that. Like, you know, hey, I will say this. While people talk about politics on social media, I think it's sort of off-putting for people when, you know, especially these days with the concert ticket prices and you've got a musician, you know, like keep it under 30 seconds, really. Like if you're going on a 5-minute rant about politics, nobody really wants to hear that. We saw some controversy recently with Paramore vocalist Hayley Williams, where she was on stage reading basically the script about which she says she wrote, to be fair. But, you know, she's reading this message on this televised experience saying, you know, she's totally against Trump, as is her right. But there were people who were not too pleased about that. But here's a little bit of what Hayley Williams from Paramore said in that speech during the iHeartRadio Music Awards.
Project 2025 is Donald Trump's playbook for controlling and punishing women, poor people of color, and the LGBTQ+ community. It is time for all Americans to band together and to finally defeat the Trump agenda. And the only way to do that is by confronting him at the polls. Do you want to live in a dictatorship? Well, show up and vote! Yeah!
So yeah, it's just that time again. Every 4 years, you start to really hear from artists that are speaking up. And again, they can share their opinions. They have freedom of speech, and the fans as well. Some like it, some don't. But at the end of the day, I don't think Haley Williams really cares what people think. She believes and she feels strongly in what she's saying, so she's going to say it as well. And I'm sure that's the same with Sebastian Bach. I'm sure that he feels totally convinced that the side he's on is the correct side, and that's just how things go down and shake out in politics. I just don't really think it's worth getting furious over. But when you say things to people like, hey, don't come to my show if you don't want to hear nothing like that, or I'll say whatever I want, etc., I imagine that you're banking on maybe one side of the aisle showing up strong for you. But if the numbers look like, hey, I'm curious as to why he pulled that down, because maybe you're seeing some numbers that, maybe a large size of my audience don't necessarily agree. I don't know. But John Cooper is one of those people where on stage, if you go see a Skillet show, Cooper has his own podcast, Cooper Stuff, check it out. But he's one of those people where I've gone to numerous Skillet shows. I've seen them perform. He's not up there going on these political rants. He'll talk about his faith a little bit, but even that, they're not out there. They're just putting on a great rock show, and they put on a really, really exciting show. But this is what John Cooper had to say in response to this message from Sebastian Bach. I'm very curious to hear what y'all think about this. In a new interview with the Rebellious Remarks podcast, John Cooper called out Sebastian Bach over that post on social media, rejecting fans who don't want to hear about politics at their show. He also claims at a recent performance, he interacted with an unnamed famous rock DJ who refused to associate with him because of his political stances dating back to 2020. He said, "We're not even worth talking to for some people. Those things are going away. Certainly there are places in the industry that have that. The industry is taking longer to be inclusive than the fans." I totally agree with what he's saying there. I really do think that your average rock fan may look at an artist's political views on either side and is going to go, oh, I don't agree with that, or I don't agree with that, or I do, or I don't. But hopefully at the end of the day, you're going to go, I'm going to listen to their music regardless. There's plenty of artists who post stuff online that I don't agree with, but they make great music. And at the end of the day, that's what we're all in this for, and it's for fun. And so I think he's totally right. And I bet even Cooper has interacted with fans who are like, I don't really agree with you, but I like your music and I like the band. So it's great that he's seeing that as well. And as per usual in the music industry and probably in any workplace style environment in general, people unfortunately will insert their beliefs and, I don't want to be around you because you don't agree with me, or, whatever. And so he's kind of expressing that. I'm sure he's dealt with that behind the scenes and likely continues. And Skillet is also a band. They're now an independent band too. They've been signed to a major label for years. They ultimately mutually parted ways, and now they're releasing this new upcoming album, which is coming out in just a couple of weeks. That is their first independent record. So that's going to be really cool. They've released several singles coming out from it so far. My favorite song so far from this, a very, very catchy track. This is the song.
What am I supposed to do? I wanna break up, but I'm frozen.
It's called Ash in the Wind, and it's from their upcoming album Revolution, which is releasing in just a couple of weeks. You can learn more about it on their website, of course. But anyways, let's continue. As Cooper points out, he says the fans are less concerned about the politics and more about whether they like the music. He says, fans aren't like that. The bands, for the most part, aren't like that. Of course, you've got people like Sebastian Bach who are freaking out. Apparently, I've not heard this, but somebody told me, he said, if you're a Trump supporter, don't even come to my show. I don't know if that's true or not. Pink telling anybody that's pro-life, F you. I don't want you to listen to my music. Paramore. You do have some bands like that, but in the rock world, everyone I personally know is very inclusive. And I gotta say, I think he's right about that. And you have all these tours. The lineups have people with all different types of beliefs, and everybody's just professional and they perform. And I don't think you can go wrong with that. I think that's what the fans want to see. I think that that's what, everybody wants to see. They don't want to see a bunch of people arguing over politics at the end of the day. So what he's really taking issue with here is when you're putting out a message of exclusion, like, hey, if you got a problem that I'm going to be up here talking about politics, then don't come to my show. But it's interesting that he took the post down. And so maybe, upon reflection, you go, yeah, maybe that's not the best message to be sending out. And that's okay too. Again, look, Sebastian Bach truly can put whatever his views are out there that he wants. He has freedom of speech, and people should really respect that as well. I just think that if you're telling somebody, don't come to my show if you don't want to hear me potentially talking about politics. I will say this though, to be fair to Sebastian Bach as well, I've been to a show and I've never heard him going on rants. And again, all respect due. He puts on a good show. He's a great vocalist. So, it's very interesting, all of this stuff, but you're going to have political differences between people. But John Cooper is a big free speech guy, and so he's going to support people's freedom of speech. He's just criticizing here as well. But I thought it was interesting. I'm curious to hear what you all think in the comments about artists. Does it bother you if they talk about politics? And is it enough for them to get to the point where you don't want to support them anymore if they're saying things that you don't agree with? I'm curious to hear about that down in the comments, as always. Again, the new Skillet record, Revolution, is coming out right around the corner in just a couple of weeks. They've got several new singles out as well, including their song All That Matters. Hope to have them on the show soon here to support that new upcoming record. It would be freaking awesome. So anyways, y'all, thank you so much as always for tuning in. That's your latest update here from Rockfeed. Be sure to subscribe and notifications on for the latest news and updates.